In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, I have a great chat with Kris Libunao, the Executive Director and Chief Sustainability Officer of Smart CT, a non-profit organisation based in the Philippines. Kris tells us about her background in urban planning, law and policy research, and what sparked her interest in the space, as well as what a smart community means to her. We discuss how smart city practices need to be different in developing countries and the importance of data gathering, data literacy, and community engagement. Kris and I talk about how the Philippines is embracing smart concepts and the challenges and opportunities that have been brought to the forefront this year during the pandemic. Kris then tells us about Smart CT and how they're building a community around the organisation. We finish our chat discussing the emerging trends of data appreciation and literacy, digital infrastructure, and bottom-up approaches, plus some of Kris's favourite smart community resources. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hi, Smart Community friends. We have some exciting news. After 2.5 years and almost 200 episodes, the Smart Community Podcast has reached a major milestone. 100,000 downloads. 100,000. Wow. We are celebrating big time, digitally and socially distanced, of course, and you are invited. We are having an online party featuring smart fun and games, plus a keynote from Jonathan Reichenthal and an awesome panel discussion. It will be on Thursday, 8th of October 2020 from 4 p.m. Queensland time. Head to mysmart.community/100K. That's 100K. To find out more details and check out what time that will be in your time zone. That's mysmart.community/100 and the letter K. Can't wait to see you there. Talk soon. Bye. Hello, Kris. How are you today?
I'm good. How about you?
Very well. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, me too. I'm quite excited talking about, smart communities and smart cities as well.
Yeah, well, let's jump straight in. And can you tell us about your background and what you're passionate about?
Okay, so I'm Kris Libunao. My background is urban planning. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Sustainability Officer of Smart City. Smart City is a non-profit organization based in the Philippines. And that's basically it.
Excellent. So tell us about how you, came to be the Executive Director of Smart City.
Okay, so I have, more than a decade of consultancies, more on policy research with different government agencies in the Philippines. I did consultancies with Department of Transportation and other government agencies, and I did work with international organizations as well in terms of policy research. Because of my background as an urban planning, I think there was a need in terms of merging the policies and technologies as well, and the governance and technologies. And that's how I came about forming this organization, Smart City. Our goal really is to transform how we think, how we do, and how we, plan smart cities in developing countries. Because we really believe that the approach of how you plan and how you do smart cities in developed countries, in rich countries, or should be different in our approach in the developing world. So yeah.
Super interesting. So tell us what sparked your interest in the smart community space.
Yeah, so what sparked my interest in the smart community space is basically my background, because I did a stint of law. I did that in Singapore. I studied studied undergrad in the Philippines, and I went to law school in Singapore and work in a law firm as well. But I realized, I want something that should be done on the ground. I want action on the ground. So I went back to the Philippines and studied urban planning. So when I studied urban planning, I thought, the policies and the groundwork would be balanced. But then I realized that it's more like policies as well. Even if we plan in the Philippines, even if we plan, like land use plans and all, it ended up just a plan itself. And implementation-wise, it's really lacking. So that's where I found out that, perhaps technology can, help us in terms of implementation and in terms of sustaining those plans and making sure that it's happening on the ground. So I look into it and I did my research and all, and I came about the concept of smart cities and smart communities. Then I realized, this is a good, concept. But then again, when you trace, I think you already know about this and you're familiar with this. When you trace the history, it's really like technologically driven. It's really vendor driven by the tech companies. But later on, the government realized that it's the way to go. It's digitalization is really the way to go. So I realized that there should be like an initiative in the Philippines and in the developing countries in terms of smart communities, and with a different approach. So I really believe in the vision of smart communities and smart cities as well. If you implement it right.
Absolutely. I think implementation is so important. And I really like what you said about, you can have all the planning and, that really good theory and even practice in the plans, but if you don't implement them on the ground and then test and try and maybe even change things up if it's not working how you thought, because at the end of the day, humans, are humans, and we can't necessarily always say, it's going to happen in this way or act in that way, and also learning from different areas as well. And I really like your thoughts around how in developing countries that we do need potentially a different approach, and also starting from the ground level. So it's not like, we're going to plan and design this thing over here in this country and then try and put it into the Philippines, for example. It's actually about on the ground, getting in with the people that it's going to affect the most. Well, let's go on to what is a smart community to you?
Well, a smart community for me and for the Smart City as an organization as well, we believe that it's a community that uses first data, that uses technology as well to improve the quality of life, of quality of services that it provides to the people, to the people in an environment that's becoming, denser and denser. So we believe that smart community is collaborative, it's open, it's fair, and it's a sustainable community. And at the end of the day, technology is just a means to an end. It's not really the center of everything.
Yeah, it's not the outcome. And it's a way of getting to the outcome. And I often talk about it, it's a tool. And we have so many different tools in our tool belt, and technology is one of those. But I like your point around data as well, because I think that's really important. And then that collaborative approach. And you talked about the approach being different in developing countries. Can you talk about some of the differences, I suppose, that maybe the rest of the audience is, thinking about? How is it different in developing countries to say, somewhere like, Australia or whatever?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, if you look at the Philippines, currently the smart city practices in the Philippines and in developing countries, often, the projects that are implemented are currently top-down approach. It's commonly led by the government and by, private corporations as well. So because of this, one, the communities are often left out without proper knowledge and excluded from the discussion in terms of decision making. Then number two, of course, too many digital and smart city projects do not work well because it cannot be sustained, and sometimes it's over budget. If you look at the Philippines, when I was doing my research, I was surprised that there was an initiative already since 2013. But then again, when I was researching, where's the data that's gathered from that particular initiative? And there's none. So that's really sad. It only shows that, it cannot really, like a top-down approach cannot really be sustained, nor a private-driven approach without consulting the people who are really the end users. So I guess that's the main challenges that developing countries and the Philippines itself are experiencing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the approach you described is fairly similar across the board, but obviously there's going to be so many different contexts and like the local context that's really important, which you can only get by talking to the community. And you might need to use different, I guess, methodologies, right? You're not necessarily going to try and communicate with a remote community on an app or something like that. You're going to go into the community, right? Which obviously is a little bit difficult at the moment, which is something that's really big issue right now, but will continue to be if we don't actually invest in that collaboration. It's not collaboration, but real engagement with the community.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, even I want to put emphasis on the importance of data. Like most developing countries and in the Philippines as well, they will just buy technologies without even considering that they don't have the data to make that particular technology to function itself. And I guess that's what's lacking as well in the Philippines and in the developing countries, the appreciation in terms of data literacy and digital literacy as well.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because it's one thing to, I guess, invest in some kind of technology, but, there's many different things. It's like, using the data for analytics, insights, etc. But then also on the other side, it's like the citizen understanding what they're doing, like why they're giving their data. I can't remember which word I use now, data away, because, and the value that they get out of that as well. And so I think that data literacy is really important, which is very different to digital literacy, I think. They are obviously connected, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think that will be really an interesting, I guess, field, or not even field, but concept that's going to really take off. It'll be interesting to see what the differences will be for developing countries and developed countries, but also just the differences between different countries as well, based on the cultural backgrounds and that type of thing. So it'll be really interesting to see, and something that I've been trying to follow on quite closely, because, I think we haven't really understood, or we don't quite understand yet, the positive and negative implications of using people's data. But anyway, it's definitely something that we're talking more about now, which is really good. Okay, let's go on to, we talked a little bit about why this concept is important, but let's talk about the Philippines. And I'm keen to hear how you think that the Philippines is actually embracing the smart community concept.
Well, currently, unlike the rich and developed countries, developing countries like the Philippines presents, as I mentioned earlier, there's a long list of challenges, really. For example, the local communities in the Philippines need new and sustained digital, and data infrastructure. Unlike the developed countries, wherein there's the open data it's really rich, and we all know that open data is what drives innovation. If you check the open data in the national level in the Philippines, it's really poor. And if you look at the local level, there's hardly any open data really. So that's one. And of course, the COVID-19, phenomenon really called for a fast-track digitalization, which I think exposed the Philippines and the developing countries' lack of infrastructure, and I guess the necessary knowledge and in terms of transitioning in the age of smart cities, in the age of digitalization. So while I think adoption of, as you mentioned earlier, adoption of technologies, adoption of apps or building apps have been sort of beneficial to many areas, some concerning trends in, which smart technologies are implemented emerge in the Philippines, like one, without knowing the current data and the technology state. Even if you ask the national government, I try to contact them as well, no one really knows the current data and technological state of the country itself. And number two, there's no consultation and engagement, as you've mentioned, engagement with the public who are the end users of the smart communities. So those are I guess, the challenges. But on a positive note, I guess this COVID-19 phenomenon has a silver lining. So now they realize the need for it. And a lot of civic organizations are calling for a more ethical approach in terms of tech acquisition and all.
Yeah, no, really interesting. And I think it'll be interesting to see, this fast track and I thanks so much for mentioning the ethical approach, because I think that's also really, really important, because there's definitely a slippery slope when, we fast track things, right? So actually having those organizations and it's multifaceted, right? It's not just can't just be one company, even one skill set or whatever. There's so many different skill sets. And I think it's really important to bring the local community in on the journey as well, because they will have skill sets that will be really important. And then also increasing that digital literacy and data literacy like we talked about. So no, that's really, really interesting. Let's talk about the work that you do. So tell us a little bit about Smart CT and the things that you get up to.
Yeah. So Smart City as an organization, as I've mentioned, we're fairly new. We've registered in the country since 2019, but 2019 around July. Currently, we're looking for pilot cities to jumpstart our approach in terms of co-designing. Instead of having like an app already, we will co-design all the apps. We will co-design the data portal as well. Our approach, rather than in terms of urban planning, rather than, this big plans, it's comprehensive, but it's not so agile. Our approach really is more agile and it's more tactical as well. In terms of the technology that we use, we believe that interoperable should be the key. Interoperability in technology should be the key. So we usually use open source as well. And we prioritize a systems approach. Since you mentioned earlier, it's a smart community it's multifaceted. It's an ecosystem really. So we use a systems approach in terms of implementing and in terms of acquiring different technologies or different solutions, wherein we want even the poorest or even the smallest communities can adopt those particular solutions. Because right now, what we're hearing really is if you approach a municipality in the Philippines it's not really urbanized. It's kind of like the rural communities in the Philippines, and I think they are the one who need digitalization most. They're the one who really need the value that this smart cities is giving. So our approach is we want it to cater to them as well. If we think that our solutions cater to them, then we believe that it will cater even more so to the big cities as well. So I guess we want it to be called, smart cities with a heart, because we believe that it's not really kind of like if you think about smart cities, the first thing that entered your mind, it's like technology. It's more like utopia, a robotic approach kind of thing. But it's not really. We want people to think once they hear or once they think about smart cities, it's open, as I mentioned earlier, it's open, collaborative, it's sustainable and fair communities really. So so we're quite excited. The launching of our organization would be around September. So there's a bunch of planned webinars already. So quite awesome. Excited this year. Yeah.
And obviously you've built this on your already extensive career, and then this is kind of the next step to actually get on the ground and implement this stuff, right?
Yeah. So currently, actually, I'm surprised as well because we're kind of building a community within our organization as well. So even if, the COVID-19 really, really brought us, there are projects that was postponed and all, but from 5 volunteers, currently we have more than 20 volunteers. And those volunteers are really willing to share. I call it share their work of hearts, because they just share whatever the skills that they have, just because they believe in the vision and mission of the Smart City organization as well. So,
So interesting. And I'm really looking forward to following along. It's a passion of mine as well, which is bringing it to regional and rural areas in an appropriate way that will suit them, and not just trying to fit a city approach or an urban approach to regional and rural areas. And I think it starts with very basic stuff, which maybe, the cities aren't even thinking about because it's already there, so it's taken for granted. But just having digital connectivity, having digital literacy programs, understanding, devices and what it means, and that also it's not a one-size-fits-all. Like, what your grandma might need will be different to what the teenagers will need or whatever. But having that level of literacy so then we can be safe and productive and happy while we're increasing that digitization, because I think that's really important as well, that we don't get overwhelmed and sucked up into just, we need the latest, blockchain or whatever. So, it's really interesting. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to following along.
Thank you.
The heart is really important. I had early on, what's his name? Zubin Pratap. He was talking about bringing the heart to the smart city approach, which I think is really key. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the future, and I guess particularly focusing in on your area of expertise. What are the emerging trends that people aren't talking about enough?
I guess, as I've mentioned earlier, I guess data first would be, because it's not as sexy as, just building apps. So data appreciation, it's really hard to get out there. Like, especially in cities as well, when we talk to, like government officials, the first thing that they will ask is, where are your apps and all? But if we ask about where are your data first, so we can build the apps from there, they don't really get it. So I guess that's the first one that I think people aren't really talking about, considering that sooner or later, as they've said, data will be the oil of the future. So that's the first one. The second one would be the foundations, the digital foundations, which is, the infrastructure really. The third one would be both the the technology standards and the data standards as well. I think it should be in the mainstream already, that there should be a standardized approach in terms how you will publish your data. Because if you will publish it in PDF and all, it's not really reusable. And if you want the people to be more engaged and for them to use that particular data that you released, then you should release it in a format that's usable for them and machine readable as well. So that's the other one. And I guess the last one would be kind of like controversial, I guess. I think there's a danger if we do business as usual, as I've said, it's the local communities might bear the danger of having this monopolistic private entities owning all the smart city services and owning all the data, all the information, leading to, reduced public control and regulation over not only the data, but the technological system as well. So that's one controversial but really important, I guess, issue to talk about as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think it's something, we don't talk about enough. We're getting, people starting to talk about it. And I guess the other thing is, like, we don't have all the answers right now, and that's okay. But I think starting that conversation, generating ideas, listening to different viewpoints as well, because people will have different viewpoints from different sectors. That's where we're going to come up with, the solution. And it'll be different in different places and countries. But I agree the standardized approach to things that can be standardized is something that, is happening in pockets, but probably not widely known around in the space. So, yeah.
And I think there's in terms of standardization, I hope it will not be a top-down approach as well. It should be, the private entity should be engaged really, because they're the one who has the expertise. So as I mentioned, it should be a collaborative and approach in terms of standardization between the private entities and the government as well. So I think that's really important. And on top of that, perhaps learn from, what's so-called failures of the other smart cities in other countries and learn from it. And how can you move away from those particular failures that they experience?
Nathaniel Babington from Newcastle City Council said he only wants to make new mistakes, not ones that have already been made. So yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah, I liked that.
Yeah.
And I'm keen to hear some of your favorite smart community resources. So what things do you read, listen to, people that you follow?
Yeah. Well, I usually follow like the Open Data Initiative, the Open Data Institute, the Open Knowledge Foundation. I follow their Open Cities projects. Then another one is the Sunlight Foundation. I like their approach in terms of what they call this, like design thinking approach on how to engage the user perspective as well in terms of kind of like sprinting the smart city planning kind of thing. So another one would be European Union. I really like the approach of the European Union. And I also like, because I like how organized they are. You'll just go to their one particular website and all the resources would be there. So yeah, so it's the European Union Smart Cities Information System.com, I think. Yeah.
No, some great resources there.
Yeah.
So we'll put the links in the show notes. And yeah, it's been so great to chat with you, Kris. Thanks so much for sharing what you're doing and your thoughts around bringing the heart back to smart communities, and particularly in developing countries. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you get up to later on this year and into the future. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Zoe, for, allowing me to share what's happening in the developing countries as well, and what's happening in the Philippines, and hopefully we'll be up to speed in terms of developing our smart communities in the Philippines and in the developing countries as well.
Well, I just have one last question, which is how can people connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So in the Philippines, Facebook is the king. They said so. So you guys can follow us in Facebook. It's Smart City, Citizens X Technology in Facebook. Then if you want to email me as well, just email me at kris@smartcity.org. And you can follow me in LinkedIn as well as Kris Libunao.
Excellent. And we will put all the links in the show notes so people can click away and find you. Thank you again for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you. I really enjoy this.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And
thanks, Zoe.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be following you as well.
See you later. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
The Smart Community podcast is brought to you by My Smart Community. If you're trying to deal with disruption, not sure what technologies to buy, need to facilitate genuine collaboration, then we can help. Email hello@mysmart.community or head to www.mysmart.community/consulting.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.